let's get started. Thank you everyone for being here, both all of our speakers and everyone who is watching. This is going to, I think, be, I mean, every panel's been interesting, but I think hearing from all of you, people who have been working with natural wine for decades, in some cases, you know, discuss like how it changed things up and you know where you see it going. I think it's just a treat for everybody who's watching it. So with that, I just want to say thank you for coming, and I want to introduce Alice Feiring. I feel like Alice is somebody who needs no introduction. The author of many books, groundbreaking books as well, books that have really changed the way that people think about wine, and an author. In addition to wine, Alice is a writer, and I think that I don't need to say anything else. She speaks for herself. So thanks so much for doing this, and I am going to jump off and just watch you now.
Okay.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank you, Pamela, for making this happen. I jumped on a couple of the seminars. They've been great. And I also want to especially thank our sponsor, Rock Juice, who is making this panel possible. So just a little bit of an overview of what happens and where we are now. About 40 years ago, we saw the beginnings of a movement. It was an overnight sensation. It only took, about 30 years. And this is what we now call, for better or worse, natural wine. When I first started to write about this around the year 2000, 99, something like that, I was pretty much ostracized from mainstream media. I was viewed as a whistleblower. I was a nut. I was crazy. I was a lunatic. I was a fanatic. I just thought like, wow, what a cool thing is going on. And basically I found the shit that I want to drink. And by the way, do you know how many additives there are in wines and what the normal stuff is that I can't drink? No wonder I can't drink it. Back then, didn't really talk about natural wine. It was wine, just wine, traditional wine, as I remembered, and I wanted more of it. Today, this stuff is normal. Drinking this stuff is normal. In fact, if a wine doesn't have at least some representation of a natural wine, truly, I don't think these wine lists are taken seriously. They're considered like ridiculously old-fashioned, retro, closed-minded, ludicrous, and completely irrelevant. Things have completely shifted. And I would say, really, like maybe in this past 6 years, not really just in the past 6 years have we really seen that corner turned. Natural wine is still only a teeny, teeny, teeny part of the market. 2 years ago, it was quoted as 2% of all wine. I think by now it's probably, do not quote me, I'm making it up out of the top of my head. It's probably a whopping 3% of the market, at least true natural wine. But it's a typical thing of a small footprint and a huge impact. When you think about the impact natural wine has had on the conventional wine world, it is stunning. Talk about a David and Goliath story. Just to put it in context, you could say, well, it's the way growers' champagne started and revolutionized the world. And champagne used to say just 10, 15 years ago, it will never grow more than 3%. And then all of a sudden it was 7%. And I think now it's 13 or 14% of the market. In 2010, there were 3 winemakers in California that I could drink. Maybe 4 if we pushed it, but not more. Today, there are plenty of people working naturally, making beautiful wines out of California. The West Coast is blooming with like-minded winemakers. So with Oregon, Washington State, a little late on the uptake. Vermont is likely to become known as the state for natural wine in the United States. For years, I couldn't visit Argentina or Greece or Australia or Chile. And now it's all places are thriving, and especially Chile is especially thriving just as much as Australia. And look at Georgia. They would have not have had the success that they are having today if it wasn't for the natural wine world. The conventional wine coming out of Georgia didn't have a shot. And if they're going anywhere, it's on the piggyback of natural winemakers' back. Well, not everyone is going natural. The mere effect of natural wine and the drinkability of it has had like tremendous impact. Fewer wines today are marred by new oak, by toasty oak. There's an increase of native fermentation in places like Burgundy and in Bordeaux and around the world. People in important places are questioning their SO2 addition. Hello, Sylvie, I'm glad to see you. There is a flourishing of regenerative viticulture, biodynamic viticulture. There's a consciousness in farming. It is part of the conversation. Let's talk about vessels, since we're not having just a proliferation of new oak. There are vessels, there's clay, there's glass, there's concrete, there's lower alcohol. There is a concern about alcohol. The taste of wine today is way more diverse than ever, and certainly in just 10 years, the diversity is huge. Natural wine has brought in respect for previously despised grapes, like muscat, like hybrids, skin contact, pet nut is a thing, and all of these beauties, all of the change was brought about by the natural wine movement. So it's fabulous, and yes, you are welcome. The movement came out of a reaction that the more there is fake, the more we need real. This is a movement that was based on friendship, about ideals, and about having a good time. But now we're a thing. So popular that in many cases natural wine is reduced to a style by people who are new to it. So they want a cloudy wine, they want a messed up wine, they want a fucked up wine. But I want to say natural wine is still wine. It is not a style. And that is just as an aside. And then there are people jumping on it like the new scooter. We got to take it for a ride. Regular importers and restaurants and wine shops who used to scoff at natural wine now want to make money off of it. And they can't ignore the market. This is not a bad thing. It just is. But the other issue that probably is much more important is that big money has realized they can make more money off of us. So just as they did with organic food, enter industrial organic and natural, and phony natural. That is the more problematic. We have clean wine, which is a word meant to imply that the public are getting a natural wine, yet they're often getting a bad tasting wine that has nothing to do with natural. We are now in the so popular, people want to be imitating us. That is the moment that we are in the natural wine world. So as natural wine grows up and enters its third generation, we have growing pains. We have issues, wine quality, wine education, social responsibility, and the future. So in this panel, we will discuss for an hour, and then please bombard us with questions to help me plunge into this mess of what we are and the beauty of what we are and we will be. I would love to introduce my panel. It's a mix of the OG, more newcomers, but all insiders. So I'm going to start with the person who came in late this morning when I said, Emma, can you come on? Emma Bentley. Emma lives now in Italy. She's English, French, and Italian, and Emma is a true European wine lover, and she's been natural since 2010. She has worked for importers, wine shops, wine bars, distributors, and has written. And now she is part of the Maule family and part of the Venature family, for those of you who have been to the Venature tastings, and the whole Angelina Maule dynasty in the Veneto. She's married to Alessandro Maule. They have a kid, and she works in the vines, and she does a lot of representation for Venature. So thank you, Emma. I feel like I know you a lot longer than I actually do, but we probably just really only met like 5 years ago. Jenny Lefcourt. Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
God. So Jenny, I know the longest, and Jenny I've known since 2000 when 2001 when I saw her at La Dive. And she's a native New Yorker, originally landed in Paris to study French film. her secret life for her Harvard PhD. And after many visits to Paris wine bars, and I'm reading this when I should have just done it off the top of my head, throughout France, all paths led to wine instead of academia. She runs Jenny and François wine importer. Jenny was the first importer in the United States to label herself a natural wine importer. And that is often overlooked, and it is very significant. And she landed, well, I'll have you tell her story yourself. Thank you, Jenny. Sylvie Augereau. Sylvie is a writer, which many people know her primarily as the maîtresse of the most fabulous natural wine festival. Has been this festival changed natural wine for the world, La Divoutée. And and she took it over after the second one that was written by the Bretons, and has been doing it ever since. And America doesn't really know her story from her side, so I'm really excited. But she was and still is a writer, a journalist, and has an amazing just life spirit that she brings to natural wine. So, Sylvie. And Macarena del Rey. Macarena is, I met Macarena a couple of years ago when I was down in Chile doing a story. She is part of the new blood in Chile, natural wine. And when I wanted Maca to be here because she learned winemaking in Bordeaux, went back to Chile to make natural wine, and is part of the blooming industry there. And some of what's going on in Chile, I find extremely moving. And so welcome, Maca.
Thank you very much.
So I am going to start, and Jenny, if you remember just to everything that I say, if you'll repeat in French.
Yeah, sure.
At this point. So I'm going to actually start by asking Sylvie and then all of you, at the very beginning, where were you in natural wine? So for example, Sylvie, what was your moment? That was, I actually never asked you. I know you from the Dive, but how did you meet these people? Of course, you live in the Loire. So what is your natural wine story? Yes. Go ahead, Jenny.
Sylvie, on t'entend pas. Il faut enlever le... Est-ce que tu as besoin d'une traduction? On t'entend pas. Il faut enlever le...
Les micros.
Le micro.
And to take off her microphone.
Le micro, il faut le... On t'entend plus.
Microphone.
Le micro, il faut l'allumer.
On the bottom of this.
En bas de l'écran. Ça, c'était la vidéo. Et puis le micro, c'est à droite, je pense, de la vidéo.
Au milieu, en bas.
Non. Okay. Let me see if I can.
We had this problem the other day with the microphone, but Sylvie found out. You can't do. But Sylvie, are you smoking or are you talking? If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, we can't hear you still. Let me see, where's Sylvie's one?
Perhaps the host can. I don't think I can unmute her. This is not something that we have the. I wish we did. That's one thing that Zoom has over.
Excuse me.
Well, okay, hold that. And meanwhile, I'm going to ask Emma while we figure out Sylvie's problem. Emma, so where were you? You started in 2010. Were you in London? You were in France? What happened? And what changed for you at that moment?
So, yes, 2010, it was the year that I moved to Paris. Before then, I'd been in Scotland and I was interested in wine, but natural wine at that point in extremities of Scotland. And so it was a good place to learn about wine in terms of the textbook. I did a WSET level 3 and was working out what I liked and working on my palate, I guess. 2010 to finish my studies. And my first job was actually working at the Augereau in Paris, which is the famous natural wine bar. And that was a great launch pad because they had tastings every other Saturday afternoon with all the big names, the ones that are now completely impossible to get hold of. And they would come and just casually hang out. For example, I wasn't even working at the Augereau at that point. I had just turned up to taste because I was still studying. And I tasted through the wines of Ganva. And I tasted through, liked them, asked him a couple of questions. And he was like, is it all right with you? I'm just going to go and have a smoke around the back. Do you want to, you come round? And I was like, what do you mean? I don't even speak French. I just tasted through your lineup. I mean, I like them, but I know nothing else about you. So no, come behind here. So I was manning his barrel for about half an hour while a smoke turned into a smoke and a cigarette and another coffee, and it went on. And now thinking about it, it'd been impossible to have been with tasting Ganva's wines and having to work behind on his side of the barrel. I was 20 something, and thinking back, it's just impossible that could have happened, but it did, and it was exciting at that time. And then Brown took me through spirits, but still always drinking natural wine. I worked for La Maison de Whisky for a while, but in charge of also their natural wine portfolio. So they're an important distributor in Paris and most of France. And then from there, I went freelance. And at that point, I dedicated myself entirely to natural wines. I was working for a guy called Stefano Bellotti, who was a pioneer down in Piemonte. And then progressively, I built up a portfolio, which led me to decide to leave Paris and move to Italy. And the idea of just doing a few harvests. On that final harvest, working in Soave, I met my now husband, who is Alessandro. And so from then on in, I'm now settled in Gambellara.
So it's safe to say that natural wine changed your life.
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't have done it any other way because I think as most of us have experienced it, once you have developed a taste for natural wines, it's very hard to go for anything that's conventional.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And Maka, how did you go? Yes, Maka, how did you go from, you went to school in Bordeaux, and then what happened?
I went to school in Bordeaux in 2009. And after I finished the school, I get a job in a big chateau close to Bessiers, dans l'appellation Saint-Chinian, 120 hectares. I was the chef d'agriculture.
Yeah.
And I was always make a winemaker. When I was not child but teenager, I was choose this office. And I went to France for learn that. And when I finished my study, for example, I took in 2009 when I went to school, la Faculté d'Enologie, we have a few courses, an optional course of organic agriculture, a few tasting of organic wine, but we never talk about natural wine. So I'm discovering that when I was a chef d'agriculture in Saint-Chinian, because I went often in a restaurant, a bar, in a little town called Roquebrune, a very, very beautiful place. And in this place, they only serve natural wine. And I went often there, and the first moment that I tasted natural wine, I remember it was Le Printemps from Yvon Metras. And I can't believe it at this moment, how a wine can be so alive and give you a lot of emotion. So I say, what is that? I didn't taste something like that. And so I'm very friend of these people that have the restaurant in Roquebrune, and they say me one day, why you don't keep your job, because you know that you love that, and go to work with several vignerons in France. Maybe you are going to not well pay, but do you want to do that? Why you do that now? So I follow his advice, and I go to work with several vignerons in France, like Stéphane Morin, Domaine Léonine, Les Foularouches, Jean-François, Le Pidaki, Philippe Formentin, Yvon Métras, Jean-Christophe Comor. So I went, I shared with them for 2 years, 2012 until 2015. And in a moment, I asked myself, maybe I need to go to Chile for see what happened with this movement in Chile, because here in France, I don't know, these people that I talk, is people that make wine. For example, Yvonne made wine when I was born. He made wine my same age. For me, it was very beautiful to share my time with him. So I come back to Chile for holidays in the winter, in French winter. And so here is the summer. And I come here for now what happened with the movement. And I come here too because nobody told me about the oldest vine from País, this beautiful terroir, this beautiful viticulture paysage that you have here in Chile. Never told me about. Nobody told me about that in the agriculture school or in the Faculté d'Enologie. Nobody told me about that. So I'll come here and I work with Louis-Antoine Luit for the harvest. And I met Thomas, my partner in life. So at the end, I stayed in Chile and I started our own enterprise with Thomas, Macatho, since 2016. And for me, in Chile, the movement is very new. It's very new. And for us, the important thing is rescue the little plot here in Itata and Maule. And Itata is 4,000 kilometers south of Santiago. So we work here with 8 farmer families of farmers. We have a very little plot. And we try to have long relationships with the farmers and for reveal this patrimony, this treasure that we have here in Chile. So that is my little history. I'm so sorry. I apologize for my English. It's not so good.
Your English is fabulous. It's really amazing.
I'm very stressed because it's like an English test for me. Be here now.
Great. Well, thank you. Your English is fabulous. Don't worry about it.
That is a little history how I arrived in France. I know the movement there, and now we try to do something here in Chile.
Great. So another example, natural wine changed a life. Jenny.
Yes.
Wonderful. I loved your introduction, Alice, just sort of putting things in the context. It's hard to think back to over 20 years ago, before there was really a name for natural wine, before natural wine was, and thought about as a movement or thought about as a thing unto itself. I mean, I just, thinking back to the beginning days, and Sylvie Augereau is, she won't say it herself because if we ever get her unmuted even, but Deep Bouteille was so important to so many people, I think, on the level of importers in the world, on the level of sommelier in France, wine shop owners in France, and then winemakers themselves. It really was a place that brought everyone together and an exchange of ideas that was so incredibly exciting. It's really, it was just bubbling with excitement and exchange and friendship and meeting people. And, I always think about winemakers, how, you all have one time a year to make wine, and in between there's a lot of hard work in the vines. And then if people are lucky enough to be able to discuss, decisions they've made with other winemakers and those exchanges, and just being privy to that and listening in and exchanging with them was really, how I learned about wine and how I fell in love with this community and with these winemakers, and just how brave everyone is to kind of rethink everything every year depending on what's happening with the weather and just the hard work that entails. And so to have been there sort of in the late 90s and early 2000s, and to go and exchange at the Dives Bouteilles was really one of the important and founding moments in my life and career. And I'm thankful to Sylvie and others who put that together. It was really fantastic. And certainly, like, I met importers from Japan, from Belgium, from so many other countries, and also exchanged with them about what kind of work they were doing, how they were bringing their wine in, were people understanding these wines, and what was their experiences. It was really, it has always been a place where that just bubbles with life and interesting conversation. So it's nice to talk to all of you here, but the beginning days were, I forget how exciting it was. It was really exciting to sort of be there at the beginning of something that turned into a movement, and feel the excitement of that. So I'm grateful for the Dives as a space where that happened.
I'm just being overwhelmed by feeling about remembering the first time that I was I had been drinking natural wine, but the first time I went to the Dives, so where there were very few Americans there.
Yeah,
there's and do we have, no, we lost Sylvie. It was, and I wonder whether there's that same kind of excitement today. I see new people coming in with that excitement, but there's a lack, maybe it's, and I'll get into this, but I wonder if what we had back then was community. And I think there are little pockets of community, but I wonder if maybe there's a community I just don't know about, but I'm missing that sense that we all have each other's back as natural wine is getting bigger. I'm wondering about that, but I really wanted to hear Sylvie's origin story, but
sorry, I have a Sylvie, no, I don't know if I can see these things.
No, yeah, it's but somebody's trying to work on it with her now. We'll come back if she comes, but the time is ticking. And this is, and Sylvie we need her input for this. So when she comes back, we're going to give her a little, but this is, now we had that excitement. When you're part of the beginning, any group dynamics, there's that beginning of being in love. Everything is great. We are just so happy and everybody's getting along. Anybody who's been in group therapy or any kind of group. And then comes the splinter movement. And then comes the falling apart. But where is our group? It's just called growing pains of dealing with issues. So, and one of those issues are back in the early days of wine tastings and natural wine, I do not remember as many wine faults as there are today. And by that, we mean mouse, a lot of it, mouse, grass, however you pronounce it, grass. How would you pronounce? That's a hard one for me to pronounce. Just wines that are completely unfinished, or what is going on now with the amount of flaws that that we see on the market, and a certain acceptance. Several years ago, it is exactly what a lot of the more formal sommeliers would say, oh, natural wine is all about disgusting wines. And there were a few of them, but now there are more than ever, as well as gorgeous, gorgeous wines. So what is going on? What do you think is going on? Who wants to take that one first? Yes, Jenny.
I mean, I would say back in the day, there were wines with flaws for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think natural wine is wonderful because it opens up the door to a lot of people who are maybe not, there's tons of trained sommeliers and trained importers, etc. But I think that perhaps there's something less intimidating about natural wine for people because you feel like you can just come and have a pet nat and enjoy it and not have to know anything about wine. And it should be that way. It's about pleasure and sharing. And so some of the snootiness or, formality of, knowing all about wine is dissipated. And so I think it's wonderful that people can come into the natural wine world and enjoy wine. On the other hand, I think that, what comes with a comprehension of how wine is made and a bit of formal training or knowledge or tasting with other people and discussing is understanding, what is a flaw and what is a well-made wine and why and all of these things. And I think that, my job as an importer is to bring in wines that are well-made, to curate, to select. Sommelier's job is the same thing. Critics, write about wine, what's good, what's bad. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is that there's a certain part of it which is absolutely subjective. Somebody might prefer a more extracted, big, juicy red, and someone else might prefer something with more acidity and lighter touch. But the truth is that there are flaws. And I was talking about this issue with a very well-known sommelier who has a master of sommelier, actually. And he was saying, Jenny, I tasted your portfolio like 20 years ago, and I would like to taste it again. I want to like natural wine, but I don't like natural wine. And so I sat down and tasted with him, and he liked every single wine we tried. And he's like, I don't know why I had that impression. Mm-hmm. But what we talked about later was why. I think that certain people might have a certain level of tolerance for, something that has a little reduction or a little extra CO2 or, different things that are considered perhaps flaws. And then where is your tolerance level in terms of those flaws? Maybe a teeny bit of CO2 in a red just keeps it fresh and it's used, instead of sulfates, and that's fine. But we used to have wines rejected all the time from restaurants because of a little extra CO2. And, people didn't want to decant or whatever in New York. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that's understood better.
That's not a problem now.
In the natural wine world, that's no longer a flaw necessarily, but it was a flaw for 15.
Right. Well, that came with education. But now, for example, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if I had said to a winemaker that, there's a bit of goutte-souris, there's something not quite, they would have been mortified. And in fact, it was almost like telling somebody, got bad breath. It would feel that embarrassed bringing that up, and they would be embarrassed. And today it's almost like, no problem. I can sell it. It's no problem. So I think now it is more that kind of issue that before a winemaker would have thought it was a problem. Even our winemakers would have thought it was a problem. But now, because the market accepts it, maybe because, it's fucked up. It's a natural wine. I love it. It seems to take I don't know, Emma, what do you have to say about that? Because this is, you think about this a lot.
I do indeed. You remember that faulty wine tasting that I
Yes,
did
I
last
did.
year? I did a few of them last year as well, trying to teach people how to identify a fault better, because often, I'm picking up. I agree with you, Jenny, that natural wine was more approachable for me too. I think one of the reasons when I first moved to Paris, and I didn't, not just a taste element, but I didn't fall down the conventional wine rabbit hole. It was because it was much snootier. And me as a 20-year-old English girl, I really enjoyed being embraced by the natural wine community that existed at that point. And so I agree with you on that. I'm now going to jump over to my father-in-law's experience, Angelino Maule, because he started making wine 30 years ago. In 1988 was his first vintage, and he had no experience of natural wine at all and made conventional wine because the nearest here is Soave, and at that point, that was the only thing that was really available. He had his light bulb moment when he tasted a glass of wine from Josko Gravner, and that's what I want to make. His car went over to see Josko, and they made a group of friends, which slightly different from the French group of La Diva Boudet, but with Dario Princic, Stanko Radikon, obviously Josko, Edicante, and Angelino was the only area, but was making wines. Part of this little group, little community, really exciting at the time. He said he used to would drive over 2 hours in the car just to spend an evening with them, and then would drive back night, but with so many ideas on how to make wine. But they weren't making good wine, in the sense that Angelino brought the company almost to bankruptcy because he made wines which were completely unsellable. The market that he had built up while he was making conventional wines just completely didn't want to buy anything that was macerated, oxidized, high volatile, still some residual sugar. But it was their moment of figuring it out, how to make a wine that was natural as we now intended that term to be. Through good 5 to almost 10-year period where most of the wines coming out of the winery were faulty and undrinkable even. I've had quite a few, and obviously years have passed, so
I remember
those two.
I remember.
But he needed that time and that experimentation in order to reach the place where he's now on a more even keel. And the wines he's making are natural, but they don't have those same faults, which maybe in the early days people needed to figure out the solutions for them. Mm-hmm. So maybe when it happened in the past, they were mortified, but it was also part of the learning curve. Right. I feel now that if you are making wine and you've been doing it for a certain amount of time, you should there's not really, at least from the part of a wine producer, of making faulty wines, because the knowledge is out there now on how it could, for faults such as volatile acidity, fermentation stopping halfway through, etc. Those faults we now know how to deal with. Mouse is a bit more of an issue, because I agree with you, Alice, that recently, in the last 5 years, there's been a boom of mouse.
Crazy.
Which I don't think there was at the beginning, and that's a strange phenomenon. But I think it's important. In Italy, I think the clients are maybe more critical compared to the US, that they don't really look for funky wines which are crazy cloudy. Some people do, but the taste is maybe more on the less forgiving side of things, if that makes sense.
What about in Chile? Actually, I have not had a lot of messed up wines from Chile. Macarena, what do you see?
In Chile, what is the opinion for the faults in wine?
Yeah, and basically, is there a tolerance from the drinkers?
In Chile is a very particular place, so I can answer with a point of view from Chile, because there is not open for the instant for this kind of wine. The people that drink this kind of wine are
very still small, right?
Not so much. So we don't talk about faulty wine, because we still drink conventional wine. In Chile, we are very known because we make the relationships between price and quality. We are not very famous for that. It's good. So the most part of the people don't drink natural wine here in Chile.
So, Maca, are you basically, where are you selling your wine? Mostly in Santiago or anywhere else in Chile?
No, mostly in Santiago.
So basically, The Chilean
Yes.
people are still not drinking natural wine. Mostly,
No,
we're excited about your wine, but not in Chile.
No, for example, and for all producers in Chile is the same. We sell in Chile, I don't know, less than 10% of our production. The most part of production is go abroad. So I can give my opinion like a producer, and I think there are tasted for everyone. And me, like a producer, I can sell a wine with a faulty like a mousy, because it's a mistake for me, because I do that. I don't all the time beautiful wine. Sometimes you are wrong, you make the mistakes. And for example, mousy is a problem. There are close relationships between pH and the development of mouse in the time. Yeah. So, for example, one time we harvest very late, pH very high, so we have a mouse in the wine. But I can sell this kind of wine. For example, I say I'm important. We don't sell this wine because it's bad for us, because mouse is a fault. Someone asked, what is a fault? For me, acidity, volatile acidity, it's depends. It's not a fault. Reduction is not a fault. Sugar is not a fault. Make natural wine sometimes is more difficult than make conventional wine, because we don't have something like magic for don't have the fault, the problem in the wine. You need to be very square, for make natural wine, and this thinking is at the moment of you harvest. That is the beginning of the problem, harvest. So we need to the natural winemakers, we need to try all the time to have a very healthy grapes and make a clean wine inside the cellar, but we can make the mistake, faulty wine, but there are different levels of fault, and mouse for me is no allowed. But the other is good. For example, volatile acidity for me is not a problem. Sometimes it's very good. Oxidation sometimes make the wines more alive. I don't know, but it depends what kind of faulty we talk. And I think consumers maybe found is very amazing drink a wine with fault. But with the time, I think every people would like to drink good natural wine without fault or without defect. I don't know.
Right. So right now we're in an odd situation where a lot of people are drinking natural wine and a lot of people are embracing wines that maybe are not the best. As Sylvie would say, she tried to tell people in the winemakers who come to Steve, keep the messed up wines at home, bring the good stuff. We don't really want to show that, but yet there's a market, which brings me to my next question. At what point do we need natural wine education on the same level as the MW or the WSET or the Master Sommelier? Maybe we should get rid of that name master. That's a whole different other thing. But a formalized education for wine professionals in natural wine, so they know the difference between a wine fault and a wine flaw, and something that is to be embraced as part of the life of natural wine. Now, this is really part of natural wine growing up. Do we want to? Remember, this is a movement born out of anarchy. So the very notion of a natural wine school, even though there are 2 natural winemaker schools in France, but for professional, can really go against the grain of the beginning of the movement. Yet, now that we're growing up, is it needed? What do you think?
I just had a comment about, the question of volatile acidity, for example.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking what are faults? How do you recognize faults? Wines should be pleasurable, and so part of the pleasure of wine, for example, to me, there might be some fruit, flowers, volatile acidity will, if there's too much of it, will kill that off, and there is no more pleasure for me if there's too much. It becomes more like, nail polish, and nobody gets pleasure from drinking a bottle of nail polish.
If that's all there is.
But if there's a teeny bit and there's still fruit, or there's still an expression of something else, then that doesn't necessarily bother me, depending on the balance of a wine. And I think this is where we get into training, because in wine school you learn to identify these faults. It's part of learning about wine tasting, although I never went to wine school. So, but then, so volatile acidity is a fault. How much do you tolerate, or do you tolerate any? For me, there's a certain level that my palate enjoys, and it could bring some freshness to the wine if there's not too much. So then it sort of goes over the cliff of bad wine at a certain point. I mean, it's really just learning to identify what you like and what is pleasurable to you as a wine drinker. And some of these faults, a teeny bit of a fault might be okay. For somebody who's super trained, any teeny bit of that fault might be intolerable to them. So what is the tolerance level, and what does it bring? And to us in the natural wine world, I think a lot of times a teeny bit of fault is personality. And as long as there's so much else going on, then it could be an absolutely stunning wine that is like, one of my favorite wines in the world. And somebody else might say, well, it has a teeny bit of a fault. But I think it's important to, I think it would be great to have a natural wine school and taste and train in these things and ask these questions, because, it's about balance. It's about balance, and where is pleasure for you and where is pleasure for me in terms of tasting.
Mm-hmm. So other notion about natural wine, Emma?
So I agree also on the need of a natural wine education program in some form, because a lot is available already in the books. There's so much literature out there already. If somebody wants to learn more, obviously Alice's book, but also things like Jamie Good's Flawless was a real help to me when I was learning. The problem, we can talk about wine, but tasting it is what you need to do, and you need to taste as much as you physically can. Who tastes better than you, in the way that they can then talk, either that be a sommelier in a restaurant, be it a winemaker, or be it just a really good friend, but somebody who can then, or a teacher, if a school were to exist, because that's the best way to learn, is actually just by tasting as many things as you can and developing your palate. Because as Jenny was saying, everyone's got their different tolerance. For example, mouse, my brother-in-law, Francesco, is really sensitive. If it's just the smallest amount, he's like, I'm not drinking that. Whereas about a week ago, we drank this bottle of Trousseau from the Jura that was great on the nose, great on the palate. I was enjoying it. You swallow it and it comes back and you're like, damn, it's got mouse. Actually enjoying the wine, because for 2/3 of the process, it was actually really enjoyable. But that tail end of the wine was the issue, and which I was enjoying it. I'd finished the bottle. It's not always. I had my issue. I said at the beginning that I did the WSET level 3 when I was studying about wine. My issue with them, when I was like, okay, no, my path has got to take a different route now, was when I tried a wine which had a little bit of skin contact maceration in the tasting, and I wrote, this wine is tannic. It's got some tannins to it. And I was marked down for that, because my teacher said, oh yeah, but I know the wine you were tasting. I know it's had some skin contact maceration. You're right in saying that there's tannins in it. But according to the WSET textbook, a white wine cannot be tannic. And that's where I was like, okay, hang on a second, guys. Like, at this point, my palate is going against what the textbook's saying. The textbook's not for me. I want to take my own little path. Right. A lot of people on the chat seem to be saying is faulty wines are great. They're really fun tastings. If you ever get the chance to come to Italy, come to one of the Vino Tour tastings when we can do them in person. So far, we've only been able to do one in person, and the other ones we've had to do online. But it's great because, for example, talking about volatile acidity, we do the control wine, which has not been in any way tampered with, one wine which has had volatile acidity added to it, and another one which has had ethyl acetate. Volatile acidity, I have like as much volatile as it wants because it's not so perceptible. But ethyl acetate, which is what tastes like nail polish remover to it, that's where I'm. So it's interesting because you can identify, or even different strains of Brett. You're like, okay, the one that tastes, that's what it is, and the one that tastes of like geranium flowers is different. And I think a wine education, natural wine education fault program would be really interesting.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. So I'm watching the time and I want to make sure, and so I have two questions that, well, I'm just wondering the time of, okay, big money is coming for natural wine, right? So we have the clean wine, we have the phony natural, and we have industrial natural. This is either requiring natural wine to do something or just not do something. What do we do?
Okay.
Like for example, yes, good.
I'm going to put together with the other answer, and
okay, good.
I think I studied wine for 7 years, and I study wine. I think we write again the rules of wine, because I found that the culture of wine is misset concepts, not misconceptions.
Yes.
It's for me. It's me for me. We talk all the time to wine, the type of wine, something like that. We need to educate all the people in the chain of the industry. It's mean for me. I'm going to give you an example. If every people put in the label, for example, the quantity of bottle you produce in a year, and then if you are a conventional or you are organic or you are a natural wine, can let the consumers another reason for thinking I can take this wine or the other. Because, for example, if a Concitoro producer of million the bottles in a year, and sometimes when I sell my wine here, people say, but I can take for 10, I don't know, for $7 a very beautiful bottle of Concitoro. Yes, but they do make a 3 million, I don't know, million of bottle. If I am natural winemaker, for example, if I produce 300 million of bottle, and if I produce 10,000 of bottle, it's true, because it's not the same ambition. Maybe I do that because it's a style of life, or maybe that because it's a business. So the things like that, because in wine there are taste of wine, flavor of wine, of course, because honest, why every people like wine? Because they are the alcohol side. But there are things that if you are irrigated, you are buyer or not. What is the relationships with your workers? So we need to start again with the concept in the industry. Not only talking about the wine, talking about what my quantity a year, is my way for work the vineyards, what is my work with the people, what are my taxes in my country that change the price too. So we all the time talk wine, but in wine there are a lot of things in the wine, viticulture. So if we write again the rules for I don't know, if everybody put the quantity of sulfur, I don't have a problem with that. A natural winemaker a lot. There are someone that nothing in the industry with a lot. So we need, I don't know, again the rules and show everyone different things for decision. Not only if it's wine or not. If I'm going to have a little producer or a big producer with my choice to buy a wine, I don't know if that.
Yeah, so Maka, you're saying that if people would put more information on the back label, like how many bottles they produce, yes, if everybody, then the consumer would have.
The natural winemaker, every put your information. What do you do in your label? Don't hide them.
So actually, that really is good. So really the only thing that you can do to differentiate yourself from, because in Chile, there are conventional people making natural wine. And so as an individual producer, you put your story on the back of the label, how many bottles you produce, what are your methods, then that immediately will tell the consumer, I'm not part of them. They're a different part. And so the consumer may say, hey, how come, that guy doesn't put that on there? They just put some bullshit on there. That's the grassroots level. What do you think? There really isn't enough information on everybody's bottle. I agree with you. Yeah, we all put out our iPhones and do immediate, research when we have a bottle. Oh, I never saw this before, but that could be a very good one. Well, that brings me to another question as I'm watching the clock. We are now also in a position where it's not a secret society for natural wine. Social media has really broken that apart, and natural wine is now very public, and everybody has a voice. But also, we are at a point, instead of just happy, we're like sitting in a cave and just drinking and having a party. Or do we step up and have some social responsibility? Now, some people have always been political in the natural wine world. They have been political. There were people who came because they just wanted to drink really good stuff. And there were people who came to biodynamics and organics because they felt political about it. And now we're taking that, and I just blew a fuse, and I'm about to swelter in my apartment. But damn it, I hate that when that happens. So the question is, do we step up, and what is our social responsibility in the natural wine world, or do we just forget about it and have a party? I will bring an example, and some of this is the pressure of social media. What is real and what is not? I got an email from somebody who asked me to recommend the wine importers that I feel do the best job, who make sure that their workers get paid, because that is what natural wine is about. And I really wanted to say, this is really a great question, but ask me a different question about labor practices. I really think you should go to LVMH and the people, and the Conchitora people, and the people who really might, and sometimes, I don't know about Conchitora, but I know about LVMH, big issue about hiring traffic workers and getting a slap on the wrist. I think this is the wrong issue for the natural wine world. Surely, as we get bigger and people are farming more land, these are questions to ask. But my question is, what is our social responsibility as people who care about the environment and are humans and our community and beyond? It's a big question, and I just wanted to raise the question. I don't know if we're going to have answers, but anybody want to take that on?
I'll start by saying I think it's hard to realize for some people who maybe are drinking here in the U.S. without maybe having visited wineries. It's such hard work, and most natural winemakers are not not having necessarily an easy time of it. They're dependent on weather, on the frost that just destroyed people's crops, that they've been working all year to make this next vintage, and then it's wiped out by frost. for many people. It's a job of passion and hard work. And I think that, that's something that's important to realize. So, I think there's strict laws in place in France, for example. People have health care and minimum wage and all kinds of good things that we don't necessarily have here. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every winemaker pays their worker as much as they'd like to, because they can't necessarily afford it. So that's one thing, but that's a very different question when you get to very big wineries and big viticulture. That's more, agro business. And so, most of the natural wine world is not that at all. Perhaps organic wineries that are big are more that. It becomes a different question when there's lots and lots of employees.
Right.
But yes, again, I think that, that question is an incredibly important question in agriculture in general and viticulture in big wineries, in places where workers' rights are not respected, including France.
Emma?
So
you have to go? Do you have a child to put to bed?
No,
Okay.
it's my dog who's actually come up behind me looking for a cuddle. You can see a tail behind me. It's not. But my toddler will start crying for me shortly, but for the time being, it's okay. So my opinion, at least, is that everybody, regardless of industry, sector, country, origin, anything, deserves to be paid. In Italy, there's no minimum wage. Unlike, for example, France or the UK, where there is actually a minimum wage, but everybody needs to be paid what is fair for their work, and depending on each different country. But I don't think it's completely pertinent to the natural wine sector, because, as we've already mentioned, we should also be looking at clothing. We should be looking at these different kind of areas where it's much more open for exploitation, and not these small family-run wineries where they're maximum dealing with 10 people maximum. I think the issue, if anyone wants to investigate this, would be the factories, and in thinking sort of clothing factories particular. For example, in Italy, there's apparently down in Tuscany in the area of Pisa, there's apparently a complete underground Chinese community who are rocking out those leather bags that people buy in Florence. For example, that's where you're getting the trafficked workers in the vineyards. That said, I think the social responsibility for a winemaker is how they treat their vineyards. It's maintaining a balance which is natural, because completely stripped out vineyards with herbicides, killing off all your insects and native fauna is not sustainable long term. The social responsibility comes in maintaining what is at least traditional for your area, maintaining those particular grasses, those particular varieties that you have, and passing it down to the next generation in a better state from how you found it. Because I think for a lot of winemakers who are going into natural, a lot of them are taking over farms conventionally with synthetic pesticides, etc. And I think that's where we have an important part to play. But obviously, as much as we should respect animals and the environment, workers who are working for the winery.
Exactly. Maka, I can't see you, but are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, because we don't see you. You probably have a slow connection. Did you have anything that you wanted to say? Otherwise, I think I will ask one last question, and then we go down to questions. Which is actually, let me add. Yes.
Yes, we need to be exemplar, the people that we can and value agriculture. That's the more important thing, because if we don't.
Oh, we lost you. Did we lost you?
We lost her.
We lost her, but I just love that. Okay, Maka said we need to be exemplar, and we do. Our little pattern, let me ask the two of you one more question.
Look, the way this is, we started off as 5, and there are 3 of us now.
I know, but there are a lot of people watching, so whatever, we got to put on a good show. Okay, what are the most pressing issues in natural wine today? Okay. And then we go to questions.
Sure, Emma.
Emma, the most pressing issue.
My answer now comes from the fact that I work for the Vinator Association. We need a definition of what is natural wine, because right now it's way too ambiguous. In Italy, for example, 30 vineyards in Italy are farmed organically. So that's pretty good, really. As I said, about being social responsibility in terms of the environment, it's pretty good that at least a third are now organic. But there are a lot of people making fake natural wines. And picking up a little bit on what Maka said at the beginning, earlier on, about more transparency in vineyard practices, I unfortunately don't think it's possible to keep going with the same peace and love anarchy that started this movement, because we leave ourselves open for the bigger, the stronger players to come in and to take this name, this ideal, this community that and to drag it through the mud. So Vinator, we've only got a small sector we have 180 winemakers in total, but we're very much Italy based. But we actually have a definition of what natural wine is, and it's inspected by external inspectors. And they're the same ones that go around checking for organic certification and also for AOCs, DOCs. They're completely impartial. The only problem is that also they don't know enough about natural wine. So falling back into the question that we answered earlier about natural wine program, currently Vinator is training, my father and my father-in-law and my husband are training up the inspectors to actually to know what they're getting themselves into when they go and do a natural wine inspection, because also they need some education too. But in which people are to basically protect our little patch of ground, because right now we're way too vulnerable from, I think it was Nicoletta who mentioned a very large industrial winery that's making orange wines, because that fancy name, or wines that are made without sulfites. These are all buzzwords now, which are really trendy, but it's very easy for somebody else to piggyback on us. And so going forward, to be able to maintain this, we've got a really valuable thing here. It needs some kind of, and this is very idealistic of me, maybe a global definition, something that is respected, because right now, as I said, I talk about Vinator, but we're not even half of the natural wine producers in Italy. France is again something different. Europe would be great. And then we've got places like Chile, America, Australia, all these other places making natural wine. To find a global solution is going to be nigh on impossible. Direction that we need to be going in. Yes, to David, I want to answer that. They certify, but it's an auto certification on the part of the wine producer. The wine producer certifies, and apparently 1% of the bottles get taken away for checks. Whereas we check our winemakers for pesticide residue every other year. But in terms of costs, we can't do it every single year. We would love to, but it costs €100 a bottle, and that starts being really expensive when you've got 180 winemakers. And we send the inspectors at potentially 3 different parts of the year, so they can actually go during remove leaves to do pesticide analysis, or even go during the harvest and take samples of must. Auto certification, winemakers saying we do it that way and putting a fancy signature on a fancy form does not work in a country like Italy, where they would sell their grandmother if they thought it would sell a few more bottles of wine.
Great. So, Maka, the question was, then we'll get to Jenny. As a last
question. Sorry, I think I might need to skip out now.
Okay, that's
I think
why
it's
I wanted you to have that
time.
question. So thank you very much. The 3 of us will handle the questions from the Peanut Gallery. And it was wonderful having you, Emma, and thank you so much. And can't wait to see you in the Veneto.
Ciao, Emma.
Ciao. I enjoy the rest of your session, and I'm sorry to be skipping out already.
Thank you for being here. It was great. So, Marco, the question that Emma was answering is, what do you think is the most pressing issue today for natural wines? What thing that we really have to deal with immediately? Or tomorrow?
Oh, it's a difficult question.
If you want to think about it, well, Jenny answers, or do you want to think? Okay, you don't have to answer, but Jenny has something to say. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that, there have been people working for 20 years on definitions of natural wine. I think it's hard to certify, but clearly we're not there yet exactly in terms of the world agreeing. But if there's anything, it's amazing that this movement has become so large and so popular. And I think that it is encouraging people to at least go organic in terms of viticulture, which is absolutely wonderful, because the more viticulture that's organic there is, the better it is for the planet. And it's so important with global warming and the pollution of our earth that things go in that direction. So that's fantastic. Then there's people who kind of want to ride on the wave of something that has become popular and make money from it. And I think, it's interesting. I get more and more emails from people making no sulfite wine. And when I read about what they're actually doing, they're not even organic. And there was one offered to me made by, the enologist who made a lot of the Parker, 95-point Parker wines previously. So to me, that means that natural wine has become so popular that some people are trying to imitate it to say, hey, we want to sell that as well. So I think just to beware of things that say no sulfur or natural, no additives, and to really read, what it is. Do they have a certified organic label or not? Are they organic? Because many of these proposals I'm getting lately are not at all, like Bordeaux's that have no sulfites, but they're actually not organic. So I'm super encouraged by this, the growth of organic viticulture, even though it could go a lot faster. I don't know the percentages in France, but it's still teeny. I mean, it's really still small. That's the major thing, is that we all remain educated and aware and read labels and try to make more things. I agree that more things should be written on the label.
Right. I think that's a very good idea.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Martha?
I think for me, the more important things is we need to be honest and transparent.
Yes.
With the work that we do in all the chain, in the vineyards, in the cellar, and communicate about that, but with honesty. And I said before, we need to write again the rules of the play, because, for example, here in Chile, there are a lot of people that make natural wine, but for example, bottling now is not depend of the vigneron, because there are a lot of people that bring his wine with the big winery for bottling, for do everything. And for me, it's not a sense, because, for example, for me, bottling is something very important for me. And every time that I'm bottling a wine, I'm like that, because it's terrifying, because at the moment that you bottle, you can do anything. And it's a very high responsibility. So we need to talk about all the practice that we have in the vineyard, in the cellar, with our workers. And for example, is your job, Alice or the Jenny, communicate this work. And for example, my example here in Chile, we are in the south of the America del Sur. So we are very far. Nobody come here. You come here. So, but nobody come here for verify if I really natural product. If I really do the things that I do in the vineyard, in the cellar, and with the people that I work. And I think a lot of people is not very honest with with all the chain. So we need to be honest. I think that is the more important things. For example, the quantity of bottle. If I am a natural winemaker, if I have something 100 ml of bottle, I'm not natural. I'm not natural because you can see the process when you have a lot of hectare, when you have a lot of wine. It's not the same. You don't do that with your soul. And for me, that is important when I do that, because for me, it's a kind of life. Make natural wine. I don't do that for business. I do that because exactly. I love the kingdom of plants. I love that. I love the viticulture, the things that we have here. We need to talk about water too, because, for example, wine is not important for your life. So we don't show to buy the wine that come from irrigated vineyards, because the water, you keep the water for the important things like corn or potatoes, something like that. So if I put water in my wine for something that is not essential in my life, I think it's not good, because vineyard is a very water plant resistant, so she doesn't need water. So that is the honest in the chain, I think. So I think we need to be honest. We need to tell what kind of culture, what kind of things we do. And I think that is the more important things. Put maybe the quantity of sulfur, put the quantity of bottle that you produce in a year. For me, that is some things that can change the mind of the consumer too. For choice, the wine of, I don't know, little producer. So for me, that is the most important things, to be honest with our work.
That's beautifully said. But the difficulty is that the rest of the wine world, doesn't share that point of view. And so it's hard when you have the rest of the wine world.
It's for that, I think consumer, when we talk about wine education, the wine education, for me, the most important actor is the consumer, because the consumer have the power of sell or not, for buy or not buy some wine. Yeah. So it's for that, the culture in consumer, and I don't talk about wine natural culture. I talk about the culture in general of wine. And I repeat with this concept, we only put the importance in tasted and winemaker, but there are the other things in the wine world that we need to put in the table and talk about that. For example, taxes in Chile is a lot of taxes. I have a 40% of taxes, but people don't say that. So when I say, yes, my wine is cost $10, but I pay 40% of taxes, but people don't say that. So it's important to talk about this kind of things with the consumer, for example.
For sure. I mean, I wish people would list on their labels everything they're adding, for example.
Yes, and it's impossible. I don't want to put a lot of things in my label. I'll put the things that are important for me. But in the front, yes, we can tell about long history.
People who are adding 100 different things to their wine, like it would be nice if we had that on the label, but that's another.
No, it's impossible. But we need to educate the consumer. I think that is the more important things, and educate with the other concepts, not only wine tasting of terroir. We need to educate for the other things too.
Yeah, education. I think it boils down to that. Mm-hmm.
I would like to actually, what do I think the most pressing issues? All of the above, but also as natural wine has grown, I really feel, and outside of the wine world, outside of the actual winemaker, but the general community, and people have, let me go back. It used to be, I did not specialize in writing about natural wine because I thought it was a way to move out of my 5-floor tenement with a tub in the kitchen that I could actually make money. I mean, that's not why, and evidently, you can see where I live. It's not what happened. So I wrote about it for love. Jenny got into it for love. Maka's making wine went back to her country because she could make a difference. If she stayed in France to make natural wine, she would have been one of many, many, but she went back home to make wine to make a difference. And we are in a place in the world right now where people are coming into natural wine because it's fun, it's lively, and people are coming in to make money. And with it comes a certain, doesn't mean that people shouldn't come to make money off of natural wine, like why not, when it's to make a living. But what we have is a splintering. And what used to be a beautiful community and still is in pockets, I believe is in danger because of probably unsubstantiated attacks that come from dubious purposes. So my question is, how do we become a community again? How can we become a community of acceptance? Of course, there are some times where you want to kick somebody off of the island. On occasion, the bad apple. But even in the old days, we embraced the bad apple and made that work for the community. You really had to be heinous to be kicked off the island. So I would love to see that element of love and acceptance and questioning come back on the greater community. And honestly, I don't know how we do that except keep it in the back of our minds and say, yes, sanity. Like, where is this person's motive for kicking up this shit? And think about that. And look at somebody's track history. Like, is there another part of the story? Now, because nobody is safe from those kinds of crosshair and magnifying glass. But I just really I want all of you coming into natural wine to be able to feel the experience of love and expansion that I had, and I still do. So.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Alice. I think, it's important that we all talk to each other.
Yes.
And I think forums like this, I'm looking forward to them being in person, but at least we can be here exchanging ideas and talking. And I think that, with social media, sometimes that's difficult. Yes. When, you can't actually have a conversation that has grays and can be teased out over hours and sharing a glass of wine and sharing and not always agreeing. Right. But kinds of conversations and wine fairs and tastings and sharing, that's what it's all about. And so we have to look forward to getting back to that.
I think in person will help. I think in person will help a great deal.
Yes, for sure.
And meanwhile, I want to get to, how come there aren't a lot of questions? If you have questions in the chat that I didn't see, move them over to the Q&A so I can see it. But there are a couple that I'd love to ask you about. So Nicoletta has asked about, this was brought up beforehand, there are currently large operations such as, sure, I'll mention them, Cremelorecas, because I'm sure my pronunciation sucks. They're making orange wine at a large scale, which are technically a natural wine. What is your view on this phenomenon? As somebody who has tasted, so basically there's this Hungarian, a company that is making very low price orange and natural wine. And I did taste the first 2 vintages. And I remember keeping this bottle of wine like on its side for 4 months. And there wasn't anything. There was not one little tiny bit of sediment, and there was nothing. I mean, like, it was antiseptic. And I was like, and smelled it. It smelled yeasted. And I asked them, well, okay, so what do you do to make it this, like, just clear? And they said, oh, well, we're basically using dialysis or spinning cone or one of those guys. And I'm like, oh, God, okay. So basically when, even though it was orange wine, and I think they stopped doing that. I haven't had a more recent vintage, but that clearly was an industrial natural wine that was not even natural.
Is it organic?
It was organic.
It was organic.
Now, I have a really hard time with phony natural. Very hard time with people adding Lee's pills so it's cloudy to make it look natural. But I think that the world needs a cheap, natural, more natural wine that's organic, that maybe these people are not going to be drinking the wine that we want to drink, but everybody has a right to be able to get even an inexpensive wine, maybe not with any personality, but doesn't have any additives and comes from organic viticulture. And so I say, bring it on as long as they have good practices. So Jenny, what do you think?
Yeah, I think why not? As long as they are organic in the field, they're treating their workers well, they're, more organic viticulture is fantastic. And there's, not the natural wine geeks who know wine are not going to drink that. They're going to drink something else. But
right.
Why not? I mean, I think we can only celebrate more organic viticulture these days.
Right.
Why not? I don't think it harms people who are making gorgeous wines on teeny family farms because there's an audience for that. Perhaps it'll make it more popular because then they'll splurge, a consumer might splurge for something different.
Right. Sometimes it is that stepping stone. And Maca, what do you think? Because you have a few of these and you have a few of these in Chile.
No, for me, yes, if we change viticulture, for me that's the more important thing. After, if you make expensive or not expensive wine, for me the more important is take care of viticulture. And in Chile, surtout, how do you say, surtout Chile?
Especially.
Actually in Chile, because here in Chile, it's very easy to make organic culture. That is very easy. So I don't understand why we don't that here, because we don't have a powered mildew. We have a Mediterranean weather like you in California or like France, but there are not rain in the season, spring, summer season. So we have all the conditions for make a natural viticulture. And for me, that is the more important thing. After that, what do you do with your grapes? I don't know, but the most important thing is keep alive in my country these beautiful old vineyards and take care and change the weed killer for the work that the grandfather or my farmers did it before. So for me, it's my point of view, but for me the more important is always viticulture and what is my relationship between me and the plant. That for me is the more important.
There's another question here from Nelia. Wants us to talk about natural wine expressing or not expressing a sense of place.
Expensive or
no, expressing. Does natural wine express terroir, or is it more about a style, or is it occluded? But
no,
this is. I think Emilia, I wish you were here so I could ask you to clarify this. But are you saying that sometimes natural wine is accused of not expressing terroir? Because I think all of us, we would say that the only really true terroir is expressed by natural wine. What do you think?
I think is what kind of wine? Because, for example, Petenat never going to express terroir because it's a technique of vinification.
Yeah.
But with the wine, I think yes, there are more alive natural wine because we don't put all the things in the cellar that we put in the conventional or even in the organic wine or even in the biodynamical wines. So if you work in a pure way, I think you have the most beautiful expression of terroir in natural wine. And here in Chile, for example, something that is very exciting for me, as we work with Pierre Frank. so without rootstock. And that for me, it doesn't matter what age are your vineyard, if it's this old vineyard or it's a young vineyard, but when the vineyard is completely in your own body, that is a really beautiful expression of terroir that we can find here in Chile. So in natural wine, because the yeast too, when you put the selection yeast, it's not the same when you develop your yeast that you have, your native yeast that you have in your vineyard and in your cellar. So that I think is beautiful for the expression of wine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why we're all here. I think we believe that natural wine is the most pure expression of terroir there is, because you know, I mean, the system that Olivier Cousin, for example, was taken to court for calling his wine Anjou when he is in Anjou, because, you know, his wine was no longer considered typical, because in the region what was typical was machine harvesting, yeasting, high yields, you know, everything that is not an expression of terroir to me. And so that somebody who is hand picking, working with a horse, or organic viticulture with, you know, all kinds of flora and fauna and biodiversity, that is a pure expression of terroir. And so it's the world turned on its head. And that's the difficulty sometimes, is that what a natural vigneron is doing in their town, maybe they're the only one. And if they're the only one, it's no longer considered typical. However, to me, it is the most pure, lovely expression of terroir there is.
That said, I thoroughly believe that, but I also think there are some techniques that even natural winemakers can do that they're sometimes just a very simple vin soif may not be the most expressive of terroir, and I think that happens a lot when people are not farming their own grapes and they're relying more on techniques as opposed to I'm getting this. They're playing. Are they really expressing a terroir when they're not intimate with the land they're working with? I'm not sure that can express terroir. So that and that's more obviously in California, that's done a lot. I hope that it answers that. There's I think we have time for 2 more questions. Let me see what let's see. Okay, what can we do to move towards a natural wine community that cares more about ecological and social practices of a winery than about clear bottles and fancy labels? Well, we're going to have to do a lot more work on Instagram to deal with the label issue. What can we? I think we've probably. What can we do about it? I don't know. Take out the bullwhip? I don't know.
I think it's about communicating. I mean, I think, you know, my company sells plenty of fancy labels and clear bottles, but, you know, there's a story of every winery on our website.
Do your research.
I think that, you know, we do our research and we try to communicate people's stories, and that's what our job is to communicate what people are dedicating their lives to doing. And so, you know, this has been a crazy year of people at home, and so sometimes images are how you communicate, especially this year when we didn't see each other. But it's also telling stories and allowing for people to express themselves and trying to communicate what they do in their home, in their village, in their town, in their field. And that's the job of sommeliers, that's the job of cavistes, that's the job of writers. So it's to carry their stories with us, with their bottles.
And I think we've dealt with clean brands. Well, not really. Clean brands, is it affecting natural wine? yeah, it pisses me off, clean brands. I mean, I think that's, is it positively or negatively affecting natural wine producers? Absolutely negative. There's nothing positive about it. They claim to be natural. They're not. The normal consumer who's not curious won't go beyond that. Anybody have anything else? Just for like, I got 2 more minutes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the thing where it becomes pure branding.
Pure branding.
And it's no longer about communicating somebody's life work who's making a true natural wine.
But this is interesting. Which clean wine brand, I mean, what's her name? The movie star I see is, you know, helping promote women, giving money to maybe things like this. I don't think they have. At what point, and I'm thinking, well, what if they decide to give the Feiring lines, my newsletter, a grant? I mean, what do I do if somebody, and I guess I say no. It reminds me of when the peanut industry was, there was a food organization called Old Ways, it still exists. And they were very committed to promoting the very, very old food ways of the world. And I went to a conference and there was, you know, like Skippy peanut butter. Like they didn't even, at the time, they didn't even have an organic like brand. Like this genetically modified, like hard, I think they had corn syrup too, giving money to the, and it's an issue when you need money, but to me, it's kind of like dirty money. I don't know. It's a big, I forgot that people are watching and I'm going on like this. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. One more thing, and there we go. It's like somebody wanted book. This is because this is self-promotional. Can you basically, what was that question about? What books? Are there any specific resources that you could recommend for more academic side of learning about natural wine?
All Alice's books.
All of Alice's books. Alice's newsletter, The Feiring Line, Natural Wine for the People, Jamie Good, and read winemaking books. Go back and read old winemaking books. They're fascinating. Go back and read Maynard Amarin from California, his books from the 30s. I mean, it's not specifically about natural wine, but it was before all of these additives. And then if you read French, a whole lot more. Read Chauvet. I don't know. I think we're done. Are we done? How do we end this? How do we end? Pamela, anybody there? How do we say thank you all for coming? I hope it was interesting.
Yes,
I hope you, oh, don't go. Oh, oh, we love you too. But we do have to leave the stage, and we started out with many people on the panel, and now we're down to 3. But that's the way it goes. Thank you, Christy. Thank you all for thanking us. Thank you, Gina.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
I wish I could have seen you all. It is the most bizarre experience to talk to you and say hi, and I can't see you. So next time in person. All right. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Maka. Thank you, Sylvie. You're here in spirit.
Yes, next time.
Thank you, Emma, for coming in. We love you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
We love you. So thank you very much for this invitation. I hope soon.
I hope soon. I hope soon. Okay. Bye. And let them know. Oh yeah, the buy walk in natural wine is in 15 minutes. And I wish if I didn't have to get into a car and drive out to Long Beach, I would be watching that. So enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon. Ciao, ciao.
See you soon.